Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, and I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about crafting authentic brands in an overcrowded market. All right, so everyone talks about how oversaturated the games market is, but the real issue might be that you're also competing with creators, platforms, and every other demand on players' time and trust. Well, under that pressure, we often rush to decisions, defaulting to what feels safe or treating creators and communities like distribution channels instead of partners. Lots of things going on. So, today we're going to unpack how the shortcuts quietly erode long term trust and what studios building strong brands do differently. We're going to dig into the early signals that show a community is generally taking root, how to use that data without letting it replace judgment and vision, and how new IPs can lead with emotional clarity in a world dominated by noise. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everybody, and we're back, and today with us I have Laure, Guilbert. How's it going? All right, it's not Guilbert. I know I'm not saying that right.
I can help. So my name is Laure Guilbert. It's the Frenchest name you've ever heard. I'm good. I mean, right off the holidays, I feel pretty relaxed after a couple of days of rest, which is rare in game dev. Rest, imagine resting.
Yeah, right? And yeah, leave it to the American to totally look at that T and immediately think you got to say that T, right?
Yes, it's really. Look, I mean, I'm with a lot of grace here. Okay, like you tried. You're trying really hard, and I appreciate it. That's all that matters. If you want to call me Laurie, Laura, whatever it is, you are fine. I'm not gonna be upset. So don't worry about it.
I know. We were talking about it, folks, earlier, and I was saying I know how to say your name, and well, I'm not very French, and that's okay. I've accepted that fact. I still love the French. And the French Canadians, they're all, even though it's very challenging for me to say but they are so graceful and everything. Anyways, we have Laure with us today, and lots of cool conversations we're gonna have. But first, she is the studio brand director for it was Amazon Games in Montreal, and there's kind of an interesting transition that's happening, like kind of in this moment, and if you want to share a little bit, I guess, about it, please take a time to do so. But you're still a studio brand director, essentially, right?
And I am. I don't think that's going to change. It's a lot of uncertainty, but yes, it was very recent. Right before the holidays, Ubisoft Montreal is now going to be our home. And like they acquired our team, our studio. They acquired March of Giants, our game, which had a successful alpha earlier this year. So yeah, that's kind of ongoing. So it's big news. The team is excited. It's a big change, but yeah, I'm in between, I guess, roles and companies at the moment.
That is cool. And again, congrats on that transition and everything else. And in March of Giants, that was what a multiplayer MOGA focused game.
Yes. So it's a MOBA that we're developing in Montreal. Most of our team in Montreal made Rainbow Six Siege. So once that was kind of done, a lot of people moved over and wanted to do something else. And after, I remember the conversation I had with our creative, which was, what do you do after making a successful shooter? Where I guess you go for something harder, right? You choose a next mountain to climb, and that was making a MOBA. So I think it's interesting. We just had an alpha. We can talk about it later if you want. But yeah, and it went pretty well. We're very happy with the reception, the gameplay reception, etc. So it's been a journey.
Excellent. And you mentioned shooter too, because it's kind of funny. It's like full circle here too, because you did have some experience working on a live service FPS too, right?
Yes, I did. I worked on Siege as well. So I worked on Rainbow Six Siege from 2017 until I left in 2023. Was it 2023? It's where I started my career. Honestly, I started my career in multiplayer shooter. And then I just kept on climbing with the game that kept on growing. So from there, I transitioned to Amazon because the team I had worked with really wanted to work with me again. And I got very lucky. And now I'm on this new journey. But yeah, I got to work on the shooter, and now I'm working on this. So I'd say my specialty really is in PvP competitive multiplayer games. Like that's the expertise I built over time of my career. So it's been an interesting journey. Sometimes I wish I was working on narrative games. And like indie even, I love indie games, but it's where I guess my talents and my passion lies right now. So I'm really enjoying it.
Awesome. Well, really like listening to that story and even the transition and all that. It's really exciting time for you guys. So
Thank you.
again, congrats. And I mean, when you're not like in transition mode and working hard on all these types of projects and everything, what kind of things do you like to do in your spare time to unwind? I mean, you had a little bit of a break, I from what I understand. Any time for hobbies and stuff during that time?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a lot of hobbies, honestly. I come from a family of artists. Like my mom was a ballerina, my grandfather and my grandmother were both opera singers. So I've always dabbled in the arts of music. So I play guitar, I'm a singer. I do those like for fun on the side. Nice. I'm very good at karaoke, I've been told. So I do a lot of that. But also, I think generally I don't, you can look behind me. I have a lot of plants. I garden a lot. So I've been tending to my garden. What you're seeing here in the back is a hydroponic tower. So I'm going to start, that we built, we 3D printed that. So we're going to start growing stuff from water. Anyways, I dabble in a lot of different things, but I really do love the arts. I do all sorts of them, from dance to singing to drawing to painting. Like I really, really love that. It suits me.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you know what? I bet it does a lot too to really help you with the work that you do too, and like that relaxing process. It lets your mind grow in a different way, and then I'm sure you find interesting ways to bring it right back to the work that you do. So
I do. I mean, if you want me to talk a bit about that, before I studied advertising and marketing management, I studied film. Film studies is like my first major. And I find that I use this skill every day. You know, games is this weird cross between art and science. And I find that I get to speak to people in creative departments and really speak their language like every day, like whether that's about cinematography, camera angles, camera techniques, film language. Like I really get to use those skills every day. So I'm really fortunate. I feel like I found something that marries my love of numbers and art at the same time in marketing. So I get to use that every day. So I don't know, it's been a journey and it's been really fun.
And I love that too, because I know sometimes there's people out there that feel like, oh, marketing isn't really a creative process, or I have a hard time seeing it as being such. And you just provided such a great example of how those things can come together. I mean, there's even like, as an engineer, that's still a creative process. It's just how you look at things a little bit differently and solve problems still. And that's ultimately,
I agree.
What that creative process is. So
I completely agree with you. I think marketing is creative problem solving in its core. Like you have a problem to solve, whether that's getting a game to the market or changing the perception of something with players, or, you know, there's so many ways. And I think there's using creativity, and having a creative mind really helps you with finding those kinds of solutions. Like I think I found my calling when I discovered marketing. Like I was very fortunate. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And then I started in film, then I ended up there, and I'm like, okay, I feel like my brain just works in this way that makes it easy, and I really like it. And I really love what I do. So it's been my passion, and it's been driving me for years now. So I just love my job.
Oh, that's so great to hear. And I know, like, when we first met at, what was it, at Migs in Montreal, we were having this similar conversation, because you and I both have a similar story in terms of we came from like film and film production and stuff, and here we are in marketing. So good stuff. You know, it's great to get to know you a little bit more, Laure, but I want to also, I know we all want to get to know you a little bit more by having you go into the Q box round, where, folks, it's just a few random questions I prepared here today for Laure. So are you ready for the Q box? All right. Look,
Born ready.
Bam, right there. Okay. First one for today is, what's the most common mistake you see companies make in the industry with their businesses?
It's a tough question to answer. So off the bat, I want to say, like, my experience is very pointed. Like, it's like very, like, my marketing experience is like precision sniper. Like, you know, I've worked in multiplayer PvP, so I can only really speak to that. I think there's a few things I've noticed a lot when, let's say, a marketing campaign comes out, or a specific beat for a game comes out, when there's a clear disconnect between what marketing wanted and what production wanted.
Ah, okay.
like you can sense it, you can feel it when the marketing message just doesn't seem to match either like what is coming out of the dev team or the numbers they were hoping for their beats. So I'll give you an example. If you're having an alpha or a beta, between sometimes marketing and production and development, those things mean very different things. And it's really hard to get to a middle ground of agreement. And then you see a disconnected campaign where you go really, really, really big with the marketing, but maybe production was looking for like 1,000 players. So I've seen these things happen. And I think for me, it's about, you need to find the fine line between business objectives and what is good for development. And I think that's really hard to reconcile sometimes. A misunderstanding of like, production wants a specific thing at a specific stage of their game, marketing needs another, and it's really hard to find the middle ground. I've seen that happen. I've felt it happen. I've seen campaigns happening. Like, I'm very confused at what's happening right now between the marketing and the messaging coming from development. So I think that's a pretty big mistake because it can be confusing for players. It can kind of create situations where, let's say, production wasn't ready for a huge influx of players and marketing went too big.
Right.
I've seen this happen. So I think I think it's in my mind because I just came out of an alpha and I've had to work on this so hard for the past year. And big part of my job was to find that middle ground of like, what is the business objective? What's the production objective? What are we trying to achieve with this alpha? And making sure that marketing and development kind of had a common language when talking about these things. So that's I think one of my bigger ones, honestly. And it's a weird one, I know, but
it's still an important one. And you make some great points there. I mean, folks on the show, we've talked about this before, like alignment's important. And so is, being on that same page. And there's a lot of moving parts. We all get it and know it, but to have the ability or even that person to help us align us and connect all those dots and be like, hey, we have this common thing. We gotta move as one, as opposed to separate parts, which is always happening. It's still going to happen, but still that's a really awesome one. And appreciate you sharing that one.
Thank you.
Next is, what's your childhood favorite game?
Okay, so I'm going to cheat. I have two.
All right, we'll let it slide.
Thank you. I have two. So I'm sure that some of you will be familiar with this one because it was remastered, but Okami, which was created by Clover Studios, is, when I was younger, like I loved Zelda, I've dabbled in a lot of console games. Like that was kind of what I grew up on. And then I discovered this game. And I think it was an awakening for me because it was so beautiful, like from like the artwork, from the gameplay. Like I remember when I first discovered that scroll going down on the screen when you start to draw out abilities, I was completely in awe of like the whole thing. And I think it really made me see games as an art form for the first time. Like because of what it looked like, I was completely enthralled. And the second is a very different little game. It's called Catherine. It's developed by Atlas, and it is very unique. I remember when I started playing this game, kind of on it was recommended to me, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting into. I had seen no trailers. I had seen nothing. I opened this game. I was like, what the hell is happening here? The premise is you're this man who's with his girlfriend for a very long time. And you wake up one morning next to a really beautiful other woman. And then you start having these nightmares. And in these nightmares, you are a sheep and you climb a tower. And the tower is ultimately a puzzle of 3D moving blocks that you can pull and push and move around to climb this tower as the bottom falls. Anyways, it's a really interesting game. And I played it. It was the first time that I had this degree of like very immersive storytelling, because when you're awake, all the things you do impact the ending. So there's this element of like multi-ending to the game, which is great. Yep. And then in the nightmare world, you climb this tower, and it is very, very challenging puzzle play. I was like going through this tower, I'm like, this is stressful. This is scary. This is like the way it made me feel when I was climbing this tower and the bottom was falling off. I mean, I sweated like so much. And then you have these in between levels, you go into this confessional and they ask you really hard questions like, hey, does life begin or end after marriage? And you're like, so I think I must have been 16 when I played this. And like, you have no idea. And then you see how other people answered. because all that data they show you the
Okay.
split of how others are answering. It was just, and I think it really turned me on to Atlas games, Japanese games, right?
Yes. Yep.
Because which was also very new for me as a young person. So Catherine, I think one of my all-time favorites. If I have to give it a thumbs up.
Well, and I can see why you had difficulty picking one as well. So.
Yeah, so many great games out there. Like it's, I mean, I would give kudos to so many more, like Hotline Miami, like all the Zelda franchise, which I grew up on, like so many amazing games. So yeah, really, it was hard, but those are my two, I think, biggest influences growing up.
Sweet. Well, and on that note, and the staple here on the show, folks, is what game are you playing now?
Yeah, so I have this new problem, which I didn't have before, which is I have too many games in my library, so I'm playing too many at the same time.
Lots of people have that problem.
I used to be a completionist. I was so disciplined about it, where I would choose my one game and then finish it, like 100% it. And then that, I don't know.
Sales.
Yes, I know. I don't know what happened. So now I'm playing 3. I'm playing Hades 2, which I've already completed the story, but I'm aiming for my 100%. So I'm just replaying it infinitely until I get all my weapons and get every possible completion of relationship levels building up. So I'm playing Hades 2. I'm playing Expedition 33, which, I played very slowly, and I'm really loving it. And I'm also playing the Final Fantasy Tactics Ivalice Chronicles, like the remake. And that's really for pure nostalgia, because I played that game on my Game Boy Advance, back in the day. I don't even. Anyways, yeah. So 3 games that are currently being played. And then every now and then I go back to Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley to
there
just
we go.
maintain the farms and maintain the village, So I do those.
Have you ever played Final Fantasy 12?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Okay.
But it goes back. It goes back.
But they're like the tactics is similar to. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Of course.
I am familiar.
Because I remember when I found that out, I'm like, no way. But that was years ago, but still. Well,
but it's a great game if you haven't played it. It's, I believe the original is very, very good if you haven't played it.
Yes. Well, awesome, and thank you for sharing. What you're playing now, all that, and the problem you're facing. Like so many of us are, too many games, such little time. But with all that said, now we're gonna get into the heart of our conversation, folks. And like I shared in the intro, we are here to talk about crafting authentic brands in an overcrowded market, right? And that's always a problem. How do we stand out? And yes, games is one way we can do that, but there's a little bit more to it than that as well. So to kick off that conversation, Laure, I'm curious, in today's overcrowded entertainment landscape, and I know I'm making this pretty broad, because if you think about it, folks, like it's not just games, it's everything else that's like eating up our time and stuff, right? But in this overcrowded entertainment landscape, would you say is one decision teams rush into that you think deserves a bit more clarity in restraint than just jumping into this thing that they want to create?
So this is going to be a bit of a cliche answer that I think probably every marketer will say, but I mean it. I'm going to try to build from that. It's so important to know exactly who your game is made for, basically scalpel precision. You need to really understand your audience. All right. So if you're going to make this game, who is it for? What are you trying to achieve? And who is this audience? I've seen a lot of times where, you go through market research, you do all sorts of, you want to make a game and you try to aim very big, and you try to say I want to go for as many people as humanly possible. When what I'm seeing here is that niche experiences are doing really well, really well. If you want to look at a recent example, I think Expedition 33 as a game knew exactly who they were going after, what kind of game they wanted to make, and they made it with an enormous amount of love. So I think that's kind of important to me for a lot of more reasons, honestly. I can keep going if you want.
No, that's all right. I mean, you make a good point too, and it's and that's also a really great example. I mean, let's face it, you don't just get some of Game of the Year or Game Awards by accident.
No.
It doesn't. It's not just out of luck. there has to be to some level of intent and reason for looking at those things. And
Mhm.
even if, let's say, even if they didn't get any awards, right?
Yeah.
There was still, it is very clear that there was intent, reason behind what they were doing, identifying who it was for, who are they serving
Oh
ultimately.
yeah. Oh, no,
So it's a good
100%. And
point.
I think it adds a few other layers too. Like when you go through this process of making a game and you have to justify what you're doing, like from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
And you start looking at, like if you have overinflated numbers and overinflated size of audience, it actually really damages you over time because you start to overpromise and you can underdeliver.
Yeah.
It's a big problem. And then when you start to take the time about like who your game is for, where they should be reached, on which platforms, what their expectations are too, like the type of player you're speaking to or that you want to attract into your game, you might need to communicate with them differently, market your messages differently. Like it has a big impact overall, I think, on how you speak to your audience, and it helps you stand out at the end of the day because I think when you know exactly who you're talking to, you have so much focus. You have like laser focus on what you're putting out there. And I think that goes a really long way. And you don't try to dilute your message or please everyone. You know exactly who you need to make happy. And I think that goes a really long way, honestly.
Let's dig into that a little bit more, because I think you
Mm.
bring up some interesting points here, because I think what you're kind of sharing here too could, like, not intentionally, of course, get some of us into traps, especially when it comes to
Mm.
research, especially when it comes to, looking at numbers and what they mean.
Mm.
So on that note, like, how can you say that maybe like over reliance on, current market research methods and such kind of lock teams into reacting to kind of what would exist today or what they've seen already happen, instead of building towards what players might want tomorrow? And I know this is tricky,
Mm.
because this is essentially saying, how do we project or look into the future of what players want, and which, but how do we get out of some of these other traps in terms of, let's say, current market research methods?
So I have always seen market research as existing for a really strong starting point of discussions. And it'll tell you the state of things as they are today. But to create something really new and exciting, you need to have the room to take a lot of risks. And I think for me, the concept of risk and innovation, they are not, those two things are not something you can separate, right? You can't say like, oh, we want to be completely risk averse and then you don't take any creative risks, right?
Yeah.
It's very hard to reconcile the two because innovation comes from a certain level of like uncertainty and potential failure. And I think that the problem is market research will not tell you where to take that risk or where to be creative. Like if anything, it'll deter you from doing that. It'll look at the state of things today. If I give you an example, like I work in live service competitive, right? If you ask players, what improvements do you want to see in a game? What features do you desire? What gameplay do you expect innovation on? A lot of the answers you will get are going to fall back to what they know today and like what they understand today. They'll be like, or their irritants, like the things that annoy them today in the games they are already playing. So they'll be like, oh, I really want to see improvements on topics of cheating and toxicity and player protection, or the steep learning curves, which are hard, or I want to see improvement in communications and to other players, matchmaking. So they go back to things that they know and understand, but they'll never tell you what they want to see. So it's, to me, there is no, like, market research can kind of give you an idea, like, be like, oh, there's maybe a hole in the market for this type of game, or there hasn't been innovation in this genre, but then you need the liberty to take a lot of risk to go there because it's been challenging for others to try, or because it's a high risk of failure. So yeah, I think that that's the answer for me. It's you can have market research. You can't just completely rely on it. Unfortunately, it's not for making something new and exciting.
So in a way, then it sounds like, to some degree, what you're saying is you kind of have to, like, you can take that research. You don't necessarily want to take it verbatim, but you might have to either interpret or kind of read between the lines a little bit in terms of what people are actually saying, because what people say and how they act and ultimately why they are acting are kind of these separate things. But there is pieces to that puzzle, but you kind of need to, like, take some risk to kind of figure out how to fill in those gaps.
I think I agree. And I think a part of the, what I've seen happen a lot too is that you get market research, and everybody interprets it differently. It's a lot of numbers and words, and and usually there are pages upon pages of information, and if you follow that 100%, I think you're just leading yourself astray. It's not. I think it's not a precise science. It's not something that'll tell you exactly what you need to do to find success. That doesn't exist. If that existed, all games would be immensely successful. So I just think that it can give you really good pointers. But at the end of the day, I think if every game had ever listened to market research, we would have probably never seen some really creative, really risky games come out. I think if you were to do market research and say, hey, I don't know, Expedition 33 is coming out. Is that what players want? I mean, nobody would have been able to tell you, yes, absolutely. This is the game they're all looking for tomorrow, right? It's not. So I kind of look at it that way too. I think if we all listen to market research, a lot of amazing games would probably never be born.
Yeah. And going back to what you shared earlier in the, I think it was a Qbox round, or even about what you do in your work too, is it's partially is that translation, right? Trying to figure out, and even though what you were sharing within a different context of sharing with other team members, other departments and things like that, it's still that translation process and understanding, okay, where could, to a degree, do we meet halfway? And, when it comes to meetings, sometimes we have to meet to certain points due to certain pressures that we're facing, right? So when financial pressure comes in, and let's face it, we all have some form of financial pressure, right? There's always going to be, there's never enough money. So
no, I know.
When that does happen, especially in situations like we're talking about, when let's say we don't have the means to get all this information that can kind of help guide us towards things, and we get into moments where, we're just going to default to something that's safe, right? That we feel comfortable with or whatever. What helps teams from avoiding that call, making those safe choices that could slowly erode trust with their audience? And I know this can be kind of very tricky, actually.
It's a weird, not a weird question, because I'm trying to wrap my mind around it. I'm so used to the PvP, formula, which we can talk monetization, because those games monetize, right? Then it's always tricky. So I can speak a bit to that if you want, because I think there's a few things that can help. If you're lucky enough to release a game that meets financial success, let's say you release your game and you're seeing things go well, you will still get pressure, by the way. It's constant, and it'll be okay, how do we make more money, and how do you keep improving? And so for me, it's, I guess, three things. I'm going to go back to, if you know your audience and you've done your job right, this helps a lot, because then you've set the right expectation with people. They know the potential of your game. They know who you're talking to, the kind of product you're making. It's not mass market. It's let's say a niche product, and you're speaking to a specific audience. And so that will help you, because then you're not over-promising something, which can then fail, right? So that's super important. That's number one. The second is, let's say you're making a product and you plan on having a roadmap and making changes and bringing improvements, etc. Whatever decisions you make early on in your product are going to become a precedent. And the issue is, if you make changes to that precedent, that's when you see a lot of backlash, challenges, irritated players. So take that part of the job really seriously, really think carefully about what it is you're offering. The pricing of your game is so important for players. The kind of game you're making and the price you're setting on the box, or whether the game is free and how you're going to monetize that inside your game, all of that upon first contact is so important. I can't stress that enough. Think of that early on in development, even if it's the boring part of the job, you have to. It's so crucial. And I think the last I'd say is finding that fine line between profits and generosity for your players. Because if you create a game, again, that's lucky enough and you meet financial success, you start to create new things over time for profit. And you have to make sure you give something back for players so they feel like their time is rewarded and valuable. And I think that's this kind of fine line that you need to constantly walk. Yeah, you're going to put on things to make more money, but give them something in return so they feel okay, they're being generous with me as someone who's investing my time. Because I think we're fighting for players' time more than their money at this point. It's really hard. So yeah, I know it's a big question. Sorry.
I think there's a great way to approach it too, and especially calling out to the time aspect. I mean, it's funny when you were like that's a factor that I think is sometimes abstract to a lot of us. It's not as tangible, even though it's a finite resource. And I think the older we get, the more we realize this too. And even if we're younger, I'm talking about my kids, their concept this time is very different, because it's like when you're younger, right? Like think of, we just celebrated here in our family Christmas. And I remember growing up, like, it felt like, 3 days until Christmas felt like forever, right?
Yes.
but then as you're older, like those 3 days, it's like I could use a whole other week.
Yeah. You sneeze and those 3 days are gone. It's so hard. And I'm really, it's true. Like I really find that when it comes to making a game, like people, and I think younger people, even because they're so dispersed, like they have so many things to spend time on now. And if you're going to retain their attention on you, it's like, hey, is this worth my time? Like, is this worth the day I'm going to spend playing your game and that I could be spending doing virtually any of the 150 things that I could be doing?
Yeah, it's just a different dynamic, different concept, but still it is still a finite resource. And,
it is.
Regardless of what age bracket we're referring to here. And then another point too, you were talking about, like, obviously trust is a factor, and financial pressure. I mean, especially in live ops. I mean, an example I have used in some talks that I've done and stuff too is like, unfortunately, Battlefront 2, Star Wars Battlefront 2, great IP, great studio and everything. And yet, and I have fun playing with my kids on that game. But that yet the reason why I'm even here talking about is because of what they looked at in terms of whether it was pressure, whether it was data, or whatever it was, led to a decision that the players felt like, hey, my trust is eroded because of all these different types of microtransactions. And guess what? The IP Star Wars alone couldn't save that decision. And
it's rough. And I think if you're a player of that, you understand them, because it's really like you're going to, especially live service games and competitive games, like you give a lot of your time to those games. Like you really love them, and you want to climb the ladder, or you want to feel like you have a form of mastery. So you play a lot. And if you don't reward player time and investment, and you just try to suck them dry of money, that's when you get irritated communities and angry gamers, man. Like it's just never, it's hard. It's really hard to balance the two. So I appreciate games that find that fine line of like, yeah, we need to make money, but we have to reward player engagement. Like, I think that's the hard part.
Yeah. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment, but before we move on to that, I also want to ask this too, because I know we talked some about data, market research, and all those things, and how, like, we can't just like blindly trust some of these stats and information that we see. So when we come across that too, what would you say are some kinds of either like questions or even just like conversations we might want to have, with our studios, with our teams, to help them use data as a guide without letting it replace kind of certain calls that we make, our judgment, and even like our own vision with the project?
Okay, so I'm going to draw a form of line in the sand and distinguish two things. There's market research, and then I want to give a huge shout out to anybody working in user research. Huge shout out to, if you work in user research, you're an unsung hero of game development, okay? Like, user research is hard. And I think sometimes it's less about internal conversations, but having the right people in place to help design and develop a great game. Make sure that what you're doing is tested often with the right audience and frequently. And I think that's what gives you that kind of unbiased feedback on specific features. Sometimes it's the overall experience that you need to ensure speaks to who you're trying to make a game for. It gives you those signals, and then it's a choice to either act immediately on those signals or to find solutions around them. I think it doesn't replace vision, it doesn't replace creativity, but it's like an additional string to the bow of developing a great game. And it just helps answer challenging questions that come up while you're creating something. Like, hey, I'm designing this feature. Is it too hard to understand? Is it hard to play? Is it instinctive? Is it like all those things that you might have a bias on because you're a developer and you love this game? user research has been kind of the guiding light in helping get answers to those questions. So for me, where there's sometimes a distrust of market research because it can be broad and it can be a little not vague, but it's hard to get precision, user research is such a good tool. And if you have the internal team to do user research and do it frequently, at the very least, it really helps with the blind spots you might have when you're building your game. And I think that has been so key. We have an incredible, a couple people in our studio that does user research with us. And it's been so beneficial to just being able to do expert tests and test a lot of things in your game as you're developing to adjust and to make sure you're doing the right calls. So if you work in user research, just thank you. Just thank you.
Awesome. And real quick, I mean, for those of us who might not have the means to have either those members on team or hire externally, I mean, could you also say another form of this is essentially getting play testers?
Yeah, I mean, and it depends on the right kind of play testers. Like if you're going through a process of getting play testers, but it's also making sure that the questions you're asking, even if it's like, I will say, if there is a small thing to invest in, it's just getting the right set of question that leads to the right answers. Because it's really easy to ask questions that mislead, and then you just end up with the answers that you want to hear. It's really hard. So for me, it's like establishing this process is key. So whoever takes care of it and whoever is in charge of okay, we need to test things and we want to test them with real players and we want to test them frequently. Even if it's like a panel of X amount of players that rotates, that's a great way of doing it. So you have a bank of people that you kind of recontact and that you can test things at different times. So it's not even the same group of people. It changes so that you make sure you don't have a blind spot. That's a good way of doing it. I mean, you can even go as far as testing with different audiences. I've seen people involve creators really early on because they want their perspective early and then they rotate them throughout the process. Some people go for very high quality players for PvP. So the highest possible level of play because they're going to break your game and they're going to make you. So it really gives you that perspective of, well, they're going to break everything. And then it'll tell us what the problems really are. But there's a lot of ways to go about it. I think if you don't have the means and if you're low on budget, just find what works for you and don't be afraid of harsh criticism. It's okay. At a stage of development, all feedback is valuable. And I think sometimes it's hard to hear, but it just makes your game better. So I think if, let's say you work with a really great QA team, they can help probably with some of this because you have to do QA testing and you have to do tests. So maybe it's a process you roll by having their help. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but definitely just try to get your games in the hands of players and try to get feedback is my biggest thing.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up an important point too. And I mean, this probably even be a whole podcast in itself, but it's about asking the right questions. And then the question obviously becomes, what are the right questions? But it's things that don't necessarily create more blind spots. I think it's one of those, and things that don't just give a straight up yes or no answer, or even if it's you can get into a lot of psychology and other elements in terms of what sliding scales actually really indicate in terms of questions and what those responses are. But ultimately, I think what it comes down to is, and I feel bad we're not giving a really definitive answer here, but it's more of when you're asking the question, then ask yourself, what is this question really answering for me? And I think that self-evaluation process is so important because if you're is this really providing something that's valuable or not? Or could it potentially lead to think of all the different angles of what is that really answering for you? And then I think that will help you determine what are the right questions. And obviously consult professionals, consult friends that are in QA or whatever.
You can. Yeah. Not only that, I will say don't turn to research to just validate what you already think. I think a lot of people make that mistake of I just want someone to validate that what I'm saying is accurate. So I'm going to work with research people to just convince others that I'm right, which is, not the healthy approach to what any research is meant to do, which is meant to be unbiased, right? So if you're in charge of the research and you approach it with this mindset, you're going to set yourself up to fail. Because research, I think, at the end of the day is also here to challenge biases. And it's here to challenge you. So it's kind of part of like, yeah, you're going to get some harsh feedback. Some people are going to say, hey, I think this is trash. And you need to be okay with hearing this feedback and being like, okay, where do we go from here? Like, what is this, the next step, So yeah, it's hard. I'm sorry if I can't be more precise.
No,
It's very philosophical.
it really is. But still, I think, asking questions about questions is always a good approach, and being reflective in that process.
Yeah.
Earlier we started talking a little bit about community and trust and all those things too. And I want to dive into other elements of that too, because, as we discuss, like, because there is value, there's importance, it's a form of feedback if you think about it, in terms of community reception and how people are talking about your game, the experiences you're creating and stuff. I'm curious, because it's like, I'm sure I've definitely seen this, and I'm sure you have too, seen creators like treated as like basically media placements rather than partners. So I'm curious, like, what would you say actually changes when teams approach creators as collaborators instead of just, distribution channels?
Well, I'm gonna start by saying, like, I was very lucky to witness the growth of a games community from the ground up. Like, that was my time on Siege, right? I got to see it grow, and a lot of this came from incredible work, and I will say incredible work from community teams, community developers, and the relationship building that they helped foster with developers. So another shout out to that line of work. You guys have hard jobs. I think that creators have a really difficult, demanding job. We forget that, but they do. Their jobs rely on many external factors for success, on games succeeding, on their audience following through to whatever game they want to play. Like, it's a hard job. And I think that when you start to see an audience of creators have an interest in the product that you're trying to create that's really genuine, I think a really large part of focus should be going to growing and fostering that relationship with those specific people in a way, because I think it creates, like, the community was going to grow with your game, but they help, and it can create more authentic engagement, more trust. It's an excitement that's not fabricated. It's real conversations around your game. And I think players will rally behind that. And this is, personally, this is my own personal assessment of it. I think that major paid campaigns to a lot of big creators, like, you throw money, right? Like, oh, let's just throw a bunch of money. When you don't have an investment in your game and in what you're making, it's a short window of awareness. Like, that's what you're ultimately making. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also not enough. It's very short-sighted. It's short-term gain. And I think it's really challenging to even have a clear return on investment of what that is. Like, you're putting money to have people see your game, but players can feel that. Like, players feel when their favorite creator has no investment or interest in the game that they're playing. Like, they'll see the hashtag ad, and like, immediately distrust is there, and they'll just wait for that to end for their favorite creator to return to playing to what they normally love. They'll be like, okay, like, they know that they're not in it. So what I've seen over time is that, for lack of better terms, your players will smell the marketing bullshit. Okay, like, they'll know when it's not genuine, and especially younger players and young people, because they've been conditioned with the discernment to understand what is real and what is not. So they are even more sensitive to that. So for me, it's going to go back again to knowing your audience, all right?
Yeah.
You have to reward those who want your game to succeed, who show that they have, like, a natural curiosity and an inclination to making your game a part of their livelihood. Like, that's the things you want to reward as much as you can. And if they grow with your game and their channel succeeds with your game and their platform succeeds with your game, it just creates your own community, right? It's your own players, your own people, like, they're invested, and it creates a different type of relationship. Again, they're evangelized to your product, right? They believe in you, they believe in your team, they want this game to be successful. So look, this is very personal, because I've been very lucky to know a lot of creators when it comes to my time on Siege, and I got to see them grow, and I got to see the game grow, and it had such an impact on my life personally, like my career. And I've made lifelong friendships over this. Like, I have. We kind of grew with it. So I think I've seen the potential. I've seen what happens when you do have this. And I can't imagine trying to launch a game without fostering or trying to foster this kind of relationship today. Like, I don't even understand how you could.
Yeah.
So it's weird, I know.
And just add a point to make it very clear, and by no means are you implying this, Laure. is that's because you're not. But like what I want to call out too here is it doesn't mean like if someone is covering your game, a content creator, and there is like an exchange and they do have that hashtag ad or whatever,
Yeah, of course.
it's not saying that people will see that and immediately think, oh, it's more of is that, like you said, is there that investment from that creator? Do they have the passion? Do they actually care about playing this game, or are they doing it just for the money?
Yeah, I think, both are legitimate because you can still have the hashtag ad and maybe a creator will discover your game this way that they normally wouldn't have played, right? There's benefits to that too. I think the issue becomes when this is the only thing you can do because you haven't fostered relationship building. And like I think that's the part that's challenging. Like it's kind of an entry point, but I think it's not long-term strategy. It's very like, like we're going to do this now. It's a big activation, boom. But then if you have no follow-up and you don't have the means to go around and kind of say like, oh, I've noticed that, let's say you pay a creator to do 1 hour and he ends up streaming for 16. I'm like, that person.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Right? That's incredible. So I think, and then it kind of questions like, the creators that give you all this time because they love your game versus those who played the 1 hour and disappeared. Well, there's a big difference there. And I think that's the kind of what you want to look at. You want to be like, okay, like I really see this person as becoming an expert at our game.
Yeah.
Like that's also kind of the part that's interesting. Like one of the things I'll never forget is, doing Siege is we started seeing creators doing plays that as devs we never thought would be possible. We were like, holy, like this is incredible. And that's because they were so invested and, creating all this amazing content. And we were just blown away. So I think both strategies are valid, right? Creators have to make money. They get the hashtag ad and everybody, they're happy. They're making a livelihood. They're making a living. So that's really important. But I think that as developers, you need to also look at long-term relationship building over time and really reward that in a different way. So I think that's kind of what I mean. I don't know if it makes any sense to you.
No, definitely. And you could break it down into another way. Is like, it's really about finding that right fit. And honestly, this logic and process isn't any different than working with other service providers, working with other partners, people, whatever it is. It's like, sure, like it's one thing that people, they could work for a paycheck and that's understandable and fine, but it's another when they work for that and they're fulfilled, they're providing you value and it goes both ways. That is where that relationship and fit can really make all the difference.
It's like we've always described it as like this it's like this virtuous circle, of like you make a great game as a developer, it goes to real players, you start to form a community, the community has feedback and it goes back to the development team, right? So it's like this never ending, and I think creators are part of that for me. Like creators and the voices that they have and how they work with you, especially when they are invested, right? They play your game sometimes more than you can in any given week because it's what they do, right? So they have a lot of amazing feedback. And I think it's kind of part of that really healthy circle of like you have people playing your game and making money off of your game and you're developing it and you're busy, but it just keeps on going. It's not easy, but
it's not easy, but it is. And it makes it more fulfilling. It can lead to sustainability and all those other things. I know part of what we're talking about here today, and I don't think we got into it that much, but is, when you're building something new, especially when it comes down to an IP like from scratch, and when we're doing this stuff, it's really about, hey, what can we do to stand out? But I'm curious too, in that vein, like, what would you say is the first emotional truth that either you or others that or that you think in general try to establish with players that they should before even getting to a point of worrying about, let's say, features or content or how to scale? What is that one thing that they should really establish first?
Okay, so well, it really depends on the kind of game you're making, like, but that's really, really important. Like, personally, what I've seen and what I've experienced is that the emotional truth is 100% tied to your gameplay experience, right? And the overarching vision of your product. So what you want players to feel like when playing your game is the emotional truth. So it does kind of boil down to what is the gameplay experience you're giving them at its core. I'm going to use the game I'm working on now, I think, as an example, because that's kind of what we're doing. And when I started on the project, the emotional truth immediately was we want to bring this feeling of fighting in a large scale war into the MOBA. That was the emotional promise. It's like you are playing in a MOBA, but you have this feeling of a great war happening. And everything gameplay wise and tech innovation wise revolved around that idea. Like everything. The vision was so clear from day one. And I think that, there's a lot of ways in which a game can stand out. When it comes to what I'm used to and what I'm experienced, it's that it's about technological innovation. Creating something in your game that's really hard to replicate. Like really hard for another game to just come in and be like, I'm not going to take this and make a game mode. Like, if it can be replicated easily, you're not in a good spot. I'm very fortunate again, because Siege's big tech innovation was destruction. And when it comes to the game I'm working on, it's how we control the soldiers in our game. That's very, very hard to replicate. So technological innovation is something that's, I think, not underlooked. I think, because games are very creative, people will turn to things like art, character design, and story. And that's really hard to innovate on these days because, unless, again, there's a lot of games that do it, but it's definitely challenging. So I think it really depends on the kind of game you're making. And there's no magic recipe. So from, I think, the emotional promise for us, it was, okay, so everything else came around that from the building of the IP, the name, the branding, the art direction, like everything was meant at giving us this feeling. And then that's kind of how we went. So, but it was, I will give a shout out to, again, the team I work on, which is the vision was so clear from day one. Like I've heard of development hell, which is like, you try to reinvent things over and over again. You're in development, you're changing the game midway point. Like you make all these big changes to your core experience. Like for us, it was like, this is what we're going to do. And we're going all into this direction. And it made things so easy on a lot. It's not easy, but easier.
Yes.
Easier.
Well, you bring up an important point because if you think about it, you're like, okay, this is the emotional core that we want, this feeling. And then it really serves as your guiding compass because then as you're moving forward, let's say, production, they're like, hey, we want to add this new feature. And then you just go back to does it support this emotional, this feeling we want to convey? And then if it's a clear yes, then you move forward with it. If it's a hell no, then it makes it very easy to, okay, this is what call we're going to make.
It's a guiding compass. It's a really good compass. And it doesn't answer to everything.
Correct.
But it really helps rally all of your teams behind something that's really clear. Like, at least for me, I can sit in marketing and help me. Like when I was building out campaigns and thinking of like how we communicate and setting the tone of the brand, the values of the brand, like everything came from that feeling. And it made my job a lot easier. I was like, okay, like the vision for the game being clear means my vision was clear and I could have a lot more precision. So it was very, very useful to just know exactly where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely. And in light of that too, I know when we're thinking about this level of clarity and everything else, this can lead to things of like, all right, in a way, this can help us stand out a bit more. But when we get into the areas of standing out, we know that, okay, this in some way, shape, or form does also relate to competition. Looking at what are other game studios doing? What are other games doing? How are we differentiating ourselves? And when we start worrying about these things, what would you say are just some common mistake that teams make when they, let's say, view established franchises or even other games as some form of competition? And how would you say, how can this like new studio or new game maybe succeed by reframing what they're really competing for?
Man, it's really easy to compare yourself to big successes. It's really easy to kind of fall into that trap. And like personally, I think it's a poison sometimes. Like I think it can really poison your teams and poison your creativity. It's really easy to fall prey to the whole like, hey, it worked for them, it'll work for us, right?
Yeah, or I like to call it too sometimes compare and despair.
Yeah, yes, also compare and despair. I'm going to use that. That's really good. I think there's too many verticals to consider to have that kind of very simplistic view on like trying to create something unique. And it's not because another product or another brand or game created something a certain way that had a success that you might envy, that'll work out for your product, that'll work out for what you're trying to do. So that's
doesn't sound sustainable or even healthy.
No, because I mean, think about it. Like some of the biggest successes today, like that are 10-year-old games.
Yeah.
Like when that thing launched, man, it was a different world. It was a different. There
Right.
was, it's crazy to think of these things, but it's true. I think my biggest grief is when I hear language like our game is here to take down X successful title, and I'm like, no, 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 no.
So
And to
not the
me,
right
it's like,
intent.
yeah, it's like, guys, like when I see stuff like this, I'm like, you're already setting yourself up for failure, where and now you're gonna have thousands upon thousands of fans of that franchise you just named just attacking you. Like,
Yeah.
you're
Or at
already,
the, I mean, in a good best case scenario, holding you at that standard, that expectation.
yeah, which is really hard. Have humility, have respect. Like these like games and teams that have worked really hard to get to a certain level of success are not going to disappear tomorrow, and you'll be lucky to create a viable option that players can sink their teeth into. And a lot of players now flock from game to game. Like it's,
Yep.
sometimes they'll stick to one, but go here, go there, try different experiences. Like there's a lot of social butterflies of games these days. So to me, like what you can hope for is like let's make an experience that is different enough that players are going to come and give it a shot, give it a try, and then the game will just convince them. Like the game has to speak for itself first and foremost. Like let the game and the product speak for itself. Like that's so important. But yeah, like I've seen it be very like a disease of like you just look at what's being done and then you lose track of what makes you unique, and you lose track of the differences you're trying to build because you're so focused on success. And it's a hard line to walk. But yeah, I will say that for me, compete for the right things. Like I don't aspire to take down anything. Just look at creating your own space. And I think that's why niche products work better.
Well, yeah, and that I think that concept of reframing goes back to what you're saying earlier about like knowing your audience, knowing who you're serving for and stuff.
It goes back to that.
And it's again the competition is really like the time, or how do they value your how are you showing that you value this player's time? Is it creating an experience that's for that audience and that actually values that type of experience? Like that's really what you're competing for. It's not anybody else.
I think it's just I don't know. I think when you know what's really special and unique about your game and you hone in on that really well, like it creates really, if we're gonna talk about marketing, like it creates impactful marketing. Because then the message is very clear. It's like I always say, like, especially in the game I'm working on, like my job is to take the elements of our game that are truly unique and that will be felt as unique by the players, and I put those in the spotlight. And if those aren't clear either, it's going to be really hard to market your game and not have it look like, oh, it's just a clone of this.
Right.
It's identical to that. I was kind of sad where sometimes I see, articles come out about new games and they just get compared immediately. It's like, this is a mix of that game and that game. I'm like, like that's dangerous because so it's like finding this, and then I think that's part of it. It's like finding the language that speaks to your game and really sticking to that and making sure it doesn't get into this convoluted mess of like, this is a mix of this game and that game. It's like that's not a good place to be, because then even your players and the people that will want to play this game will have something different than mine. It's like, hey, this is, so I think it's so hard. Like, I'm sorry I'm rambling because it's such a topic dear to my heart, and I hate seeing that. I really do.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It definitely does. So, well, appreciate you sharing all this. And I know that we're coming on time. So before we close though, we talked quite a bit, lots of stuff covered today. And in light of that, what would you say are some takeaways, tips, suggestions that you'd recommend to our listeners based off of our conversation?
Oh my goodness. Well, I guess one of the first things is that like there is no golden recipe for success. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. I think I've been doing marketing for a while, and like I wish there was this magical playbook, that I could just read and do exactly these steps, and then boom, success. That's just not at all how it works, and things are changing so fast. So the first thing I'll say is like look for. Like, for example, if you're building a communication timeline, you're building a marketing plan, you're building your go-to-market, whatever it may be, and get inspired by, let's say, cadences and what things are done, but don't be afraid to break the rules and to do things your own way. Do things your own way. Like, if you need to redefine what an alpha means for you in your game, do it. If you need to completely change the language around how people speak about your game and what you want them to remember, do it. There really is no one way. In like the past years, I've been looking at like God knows how many go-to-market strategies and ways to get a game out there in the hands of players, and I'm like, they're all different, and they all face very different constraints, and you can tell. So I think that's one of them. It's don't expect there to be one recipe for success. That's not factual, not true. I think the second is it's gonna sound really silly, but like as developers, right? And you make a game, like if you can have the people in your team that can help you with these topics. Like I know it's a big one, I know we don't think of it, but I'm part of the development team where I work in. I mean, a lot of the business topics are also inside our studio, and we hold ourselves accountable. It helps us hold ourselves accountable, and I feel part of development every day. Like as a marketer, I feel part of development, and that's been such a gift, like to be respected, to be listened to be part of this process, and to understand like to its core the product I'm making and to love it. It's been such an incredible journey for my career, and I think I've never felt more valuable. Having these people on your team that can help you is so important. Even if it's like one person, like get yourself that perspective. Don't expect it to come from externals all the time. Have someone in-house that can help you. I can't stress that enough. I think I've seen teams where like all topics of like marketing, publishing is outside of development. And it creates for very challenging discussions, misalignments, right? We talked about that earlier. Have someone inside your team that can guide you. Have a guiding light. Like you would never think of like making a game without a game director, without somebody to guide like all elements of game design. And then you like same goes with QA and creative and art. Like these things are all important to what makes a great game. And I think these topics of business are too. So just surround yourself with the right people, and I think you can really increase your chances of success. And that's a big advice I would give if you think it's relevant.
Awesome. Well, I love those takes, and I think it's a big one. Sometimes it speaks very well, especially that last one, to how we get caught up and maybe not even realize that we're in these silos all the time. And even though, yes, I'm in marketing, or yes, I'm in design, or whatever it may be, we don't go to each other as often as we probably could in terms of, look, I know you know nothing about marketing because you say so yourself, but what do you think about this? How does this relate from your perspective? And there can be such valuable insights that come from there. And what that does is just open that communication, gets everybody on the same page. And not only that, they probably feel a lot more value too, just to hear that. It doesn't mean like their answers are going to be are like you're going to take it verbatim and use it, but that is going to influence something. And then again, it goes back to them feeling like, wow, the rest of my team values and I have an input in this, in the marketing space, or I have a value with development, even though I'm not like in the development team, but I am.
Like I think I've been blessed where I feel extremely valued in the work that I do. And that's because like I'm in that team with the studio every day, and I get to see the product change and grow. I get to be part of discussions and validations and all sorts of things. And I think that it makes for really, really interesting, insightful conversations. I have a dev team that's incredibly receptive to these things, and they want to hear about it, and they want to have these discussions, and they want to make sure their game is a success. And they just see it as part of developing a good game. Like, I'm an instigator and a facilitator. I'm not the decision maker that will go in there and tell them how to design a game. Okay, that's not my job, and it's not my expertise. But I'm here for advice. I'm here for guidance. I'm here for timelines. Like all the things that are, I'm here for Excel spreadsheets. Okay, I'm here for all of that. And it's been incredible. So, I mean, if you're making a game and you don't have that voice to just help be a guiding light in these very difficult topics, just surround yourself with the right people, even if it's like a consultant that you trust or someone that you love working with, or it doesn't matter who it is, but just get that expertise inside your studio. I think it'll make a huge difference. Yeah, I can't imagine not having that.
Well said. And so good. Can't really thank you enough for being here. So many insights and everything else, Laure. But before we go, please, what are some ways people can reach out, connect, learn more about the project you're currently working on? Please share some links.
Yeah, sure. I guess LinkedIn is the easy one to give. So you can find me on LinkedIn if you guys need to reach out. But I'm on Twitter, very actively on Twitter. So or now known as X, but I'm on Twitter. So you guys can reach me there. I go by the pseudonym. So this is pretty English. It's Martial Law, as in it's martial law with RE at the end. Anyways, it's been my gamer tag for years, and I've just stuck to it. So you guys can find me there. But really, and I just want to say, like, one thing I love about game development is that, I've made a lot of connections and I try to make time for all of them as much as I can. I think that I've learned a lot through this process and I love to learn. So please don't be afraid to reach out. Like, your time just as valuable as my time. Like, I'm happy to have conversations. I'm happy to talk about things, share. So, yeah, if anybody wants to reach out and talk about any of this or talk about just game development, or hey, if you're in Montreal, if you're the Montreal game dev scene, I often go to a bunch of networking events, so don't be afraid to ever reach out if you see me.
Awesome. Well, very appreciated. And folks, definitely reach out to Laura if you're interested. These links will be in the show notes. Laura, I can't thank you enough for being here today. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's been great. I mean, honestly, this is my first it's my first time doing a podcast, so I was very nervous. You can't see it, but I'm sweating, sweating under my hoodie. I don't know. I didn't think, I never really, went to the public eye. I haven't done a lot of interviews. I've kind of been a work in the shadows, get work done kind of person. It's nice to talk about my experience. I really like that you gave me a voice today, so I'm really appreciative. And so thank you for your time too. I really, really had fun.
Well, of course, and we thank you for yours. It has been great.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.